Imagine anything.
Hey everyone, welcome.
Hi, Ashley.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, how you doing?
Good. So everyone, I gave everyone the link to your episode if they hadn't listened to it already, but today we're going to talk about Nova, and she's going to take away the show for us.
Ashley, I'm hearing you twice. I don't know if anybody else is.
I think it's, is that better? I think it's because Sean's recording was on somehow, was giving feedback.
Okay, now I can hear you. I didn't hear a word of what you said.
Well, I just introduced everyone. So Becky is going to take over the show today and just talk to you guys about being a landlord and answer your questions. And are you doing a specific topic at all?
I can. So I'd actually prepared something just about like making sure that people are kind of on the path that they should be and picking the right strategy. So if that would help the group, I would be perfectly open to share that. Otherwise, if we just want to make it a Q&A, I'm flexible.
I think that'd be a great topic. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Are you waiting for anybody else, or do you want me to go ahead and share?
Yeah, we always try and start right on it promptly, and then I record it too and send it out, and then it's set so anyone can join at any time too if they're getting on a little late.
All right, I'm sharing that. Sorry, you're going to see my whole messy background and all the things I'm shopping for on Amazon. All for landlord purposes, though, we'll say, and business expenses. So, okay. So, hi, everybody. I am Becky Nova. I was just on, many of you guys know me from the podcast last week. Oh my God, I can't believe it came out last week. So I'm happy to be here and share a little bit more about me. And what I wanted to start with is really an introduction, and then I'm going to take you guys through making sure that you have the right goals set for yourself, and then making sure that you actually match your strategy, what you're doing in real estate investing, with what those goals are. So for those of you that have not heard my podcast or heard of my organization, Lady Landlords, to start off, I'm a native New Yorker, so I will warn you now, I do talk fast. Also, I'm a cancer researcher by day and a real estate investor by night. Back in my 20s, I used to live abroad where I owned a tour company in Spain, and then I also owned a bar in Portugal. Unfortunately, though, I made a really bad business decision when I moved to Portugal, and I moved back to the States in 2013, pretty much penniless and homeless. Not the best start to kind of re-enter the United States. But since then, I have been able to get back on my feet, and I've bought 10 doors in the past 2 years in both New York City and also the Dominican Republic. I then started my women's organization called Lady Landlords, really as a place to ask my own questions about what it was like being a landlord and questions I had with my tenants. And it has really become a place for other women to learn how to become investors, how to become landlords. And we now host a different variety of events and groups and courses and anything you can ask for. So around here is just some of the pictures from when I used to live in Spain. That's where you see me wearing a flamenco dress. And some of the properties that my husband and I own are along the bottom there. So just to basically start with, we want to go back to why exactly this is all important to us, why exactly we even wanted to invest in real estate. Most popularly, the answers you're going to hear are people talking about that cash flow, equity, appreciation, the tax benefits that are associated with it, and also that freedom, that financial freedom of whatever else we can kind of do in our lives. For example, that was actually something my husband and I are looking to become location independent. When Ashley and I actually met a few weeks ago, I was living down in the Dominican Republic, And that was something that was just really important to me. So I'm sure others of you out there have those goals. So that's what I want to start with today, that how to get started. And one of the ways you want to do that is thinking about something called SMART goals. So in case you're not familiar with the concept of SMART goals is actually an acronym. So here's how SMART works. S stands for specific, and don't worry, we're going to break these down for you. Then we go through, so your specific means that we can't just say, and one of the things that I hear all the time from real estate investors is, oh, I want to be a real estate investor. How do I get started? Well, we need to be very clear on what exactly that's going to mean. What does that mean to you versus what that means to me are incredibly different things. So we want to get very clear on what we want to do, as in, I want to buy a rental property. I want to buy a fix and flip, that type of thing. Next, you want to think about something that's measurable. Measurable means, how are you going to know if you actually reached this goal of yours or not? So for example, like I just said, I mentioned the idea of doing buy and holds, which happens to be my specialty, buy and holds in multifamilies that are small, under 6 units. So I would say something like, what I'm looking for to be specific is a buy and hold, but also what's measurable is I want to make sure that I'm buying that property that has between 2 to 4 units. The next letter, A, stands for attainable. Attainable means like worldwide universe. So this means like, is this something that can actually happen in the practicality of our world? For example, if I said that I wanted to buy the first multifamily on Mars, well, that doesn't really count as attainable. That's not something that's actually feasible for me to do. So I'm just going to be setting myself up for failure. So you want to make sure that your goals are something that actually is the way that the world works. Realistic, which is the R, stands for what's really looking for things that can happen within your own personal life. So if an example of this would be to say, well, I want to buy a multifamily tomorrow. Okay, but if I'm not pre-approved, if I don't have my down payment, if I'm not sure where my credit score is, if I'm not sure where I even want to buy a property, well, that's not realistic for me to say that I want to buy something tomorrow. So realistic, we're talking about what we personally can and cannot do. And last, we want to make it time bound. The reason for that is I feel like us as real estate investors, we're kind of notorious for getting stuck in that like analysis paralysis kind of area. So time bound actually is really something that's going to help us out. Because now I'm not just saying, hey, I want to buy a multifamily property. Now I'm saying within the next 6 to 9 months, I'm going to buy a multifamily property. That creates that deadline, that creates that accountability for me, which is going to make a very big difference. What we also want to do is we want to think about that larger picture. Like I had mentioned, my husband and I, our goal is to really be location independent. So we want to take that long-term goal though, and really break that up into those smaller goals. I need to know what steps I need to do to be able to get to being location independent. So just as a couple examples here, this would be one of my smaller goals, right? What is the first goal I'm going to work on? Well, for example, the goal that I have is I will buy a cash flowing 2 to 4 unit multifamily rental for under $750K within an hour of my current home within the next 6 months. So as you see here, what I have highlighted in orange really breaks down what we talked about in those SMART goals. It's very specific, it's very time bound, it's realistic, it's very clear. Now, when I kind of talk about what I want for my larger goal, here's an example of what this would look like. So here, I will generate $5,000 a month in net rental income in the next 5 years through small multifamily properties located within an hour of my home. And I did the same thing here for you. In the orange, you will see where I really put those numbers, where I put that data down to make these SMART goals, to really make them very clear for what we're looking to work towards. So if anybody has a goal that they would like to share, feel free to go down and put that in the chat. We could definitely talk about that after I kind of go through this next section here. So what we want to now talk about, now that we have those goals, now we need to be able to pick a strategy that matches those goals. And I feel like I see a lot of investors get stuck in this place where whatever their goal is, now they're actually working on a project that isn't helping them actually get to what their goal is. And I don't want to see all of you make that same mistake. So here are the couple of different strategies we're just briefly going to discuss today. We're going to go through flips, rentals, wholesaling, and syndications. Really quickly, flips is the idea of buying a property at a low price, renovating it, and then selling for a higher price. And you want to make sure to do that in the shortest period of time. Now, some of the benefits of this are you get that lump sum of cash when you sell that property in the end. You can also, if you're doing those renovations, you can make that space look any way that you actually want it to. It's also a time limited project. This is not something that you're going to be owning for the next 30 years. You're going to be flipping it. And you can usually get a good deal on the price of the home since it is something that has to be renovated. The negative sides, though, is that you probably want to have some type of construction background knowledge or have a trustworthy general contractor on your side to be able to work with. Also, remember that construction always seems to take longer than planned, and it's also always more expensive than you originally thought. So we need to make sure to be prepared for those different changes. When it comes to one of the things that I mentioned about making sure to sell the property in that shortest period of time, that's because you have to remember that you're going to be paying for carrying costs, which is just basically the time that that house sits without having anybody else in it or without having somebody, a buyer, be able to take that property off your hands. And remember that you also don't get paid until you find that buyer and sell the property. Next would be rentals, also known, we always talk about this as buy and holds. So when you buy a rental property, this is something that can be apartments, a single family you can specialize in. Like I said, my specialty is actually multifamilies, or commercial or mixed use space, which has both commercial and residential space. So some of the benefits to buying rental properties is that you can house hack. You can have that lower down payment by using owner occupied type mortgages. You also will then have that regular influx of cash coming in on a monthly basis, rather than what we talked about in that flip section about kind of having that lump sum of money. Here also, you'd get that increased equity, hopefully at the same time as you're getting that monthly cash flow. Hopefully your property has an appreciation over time. The negatives to having rentals, though, is you have to figure out what you're going to do with your property management. You can either self-manage, but then that means that you're going to need some time to be able to do that, or you can hire a property manager. And in that case, then you need to work in the extra cost of that. Once again, if you have not listened to my podcast on Real Estate Rookie, episode number 69, go back and I teach you all about how I was actually able to manage my own properties in New York from the beach in the Dominican Republic. So there are definitely still ways to work around that one. Next up, you also want to make sure to think about all those maintenance and capital expenditure costs. Your maintenance refers to some of those smaller items. You have to fix a clogged drain, those types of things. Capital expenditures are having to redo a driveway, redo a roof, those larger projects that you're only going to have to do maybe once a decade, hopefully not even that often. Also, you need to think about your vacancy rate. And then also you're going to have to think about what happens if we have bad tenants. Remember that right now we are still under a CDC moratorium on evictions. Some of us, especially in the state of New York, probably going to be that way for a little bit longer than others. So we need to consider how those things are going to affect us. And the reason that I'm saying you need to pick that goal to match your strategy is because here, if you are looking for that long-term play, if you are looking for that extra money to come in, maybe to pay off your car bill every month, maybe you just want to be able to live free yourself and house hack in that way and bring in that little extra money every single month, then rentals makes a little more sense to you. If you, for some reason, need that larger lump sum of cash, if for some reason you can only work on a project that hey, I have the next 8 months to really make some money and that is kind of it, that's where flips are going to work better for you. So you want to make sure that you're looking at what you can do in your own life and then pick that strategy to match it. I feel like I often see people that kind of do this in the reverse way, and we just kind of chase what we see other people doing. And we say, oh, I hear people are making money in flips, let me go do that. But if you don't have the intensive time to put in to manage contractors, if you're not sure how renovations work, if you're not sure about what that's going to look like on a job site, well, that might not exactly be for you. Maybe project management of a renovation is not the best thing to take on in your life. So I find it really important to make sure that these are individualized decisions. Next thing, we're going to kind of break down rentals into two different types. We're going to talk about long-term rentals and then also short-term rentals. So our long-term rentals, clearly these are the ones that we want our tenants to stay there for a long time. This is great because you get that consistent cash flow. We have our goal really to make sure that we have the lowest turnover with tenants. We want to keep them there happy for as long as we can. And then after that move-in period, remember that rentals kind of become a little bit more on autopilot. It's usually when a tenant moves in that first couple of months, they have a lot of questions. They're not sure about what to do. We realize things aren't necessarily working in the right ways. But once they kind of move in, it does seem to get a little bit easier. So we have that benefit if we can keep that tenant for a longer period of time. On the other side, though, if you get a bad tenant, you're going to be stuck with them. And once again, especially with the regulations for COVID right now, that is something that I understand people are very concerned with. Now, on a short-term rental side, you can have the potential for making good money in a short period of time. We've always kind of heard that with Airbnbs and those rentals. Remember, what's cool about that then is you might only need renters for just a few months to be able to cover not only your carrying costs for the entire year, but also still make a profit. For example, if you own a beach property, most people that are going to go to a beach property, they want to be there for those certain couple months out of the year. You have a great opportunity to make your money during that time. And then you can actually leave the property empty even for a couple months and not need those renters, and you'll still be able to make a profit. The negative side to that, though, is that you have to constantly be looking for new bookings. You need to be able to not only build that consistent basis of renters coming back year after year, but you're always looking for new people to kind of move in. You also have to have a really good system in place to be able to kind of flip that property. You need to get it cleaned. You need to handle any type of maintenance issues. You need to be able to get those things really flipped fast, because you're going to have to make sure that you have those next people coming in right after the next. And here also remember, you do not have control over who's actually staying on your property like you would with renters. You don't go through that same screening process for somebody that's that's renting your property for a week or so or a weekend compared to somebody that's moving into your property for hopefully a year, if not longer. Now, next section we want to talk about is wholesaling. Wholesaling in its most basic form is the idea of getting a contract from a motivated seller at a low price and then finding a buyer at a higher price. What's great about this is when you find that contract at that low price and you settle at that higher price, you get to keep that difference, and that is your profit. So what's great about wholesaling, as I'm saying now, is that there's really no cash needed for this startup. But what you do have to have is you do need to have a strong cash buyers list. You need to have those people that you know and have to have those networks already built in, so that way you can then sell that property to that buyer and to do it quickly. So this means that you have to hustle for leads. Wholesaling is great for people that are in a position where they don't necessarily have the money to get involved in real estate investing in one of the other strategies, but they do have the time. So that's kind of that trade-off. If you don't have as much money, you can still put your time equity into properties and still get invested in real estate. Here, what you want to be doing, not only for the flips that we talked about at the beginning, rentals and wholesaling, is you have to identify what market you're going to do this in. And also you can look at that then in terms of short distance or long distance. So when it comes to breaking this down, what's great about short distance is you have easier oversight. There's also a better chance that you're going to understand what's going on in the area and if things are changing. And you're going to be able to get referrals much easier for people you may need, not only for tenants, but for any type of contractors or service providers like plumbers that you might possibly need. The problem that this might actually break for some of you, as myself living here in New York right now, is that could be really expensive. Maybe you're kind of priced out where you are. Maybe it's also incredibly competitive. And right now, I think we will agree that probably across America, the competition is a little bit even higher than we're normally used to. So you might be a person that's in this position saying, Becky, I cannot buy where I currently am. Short distance is not going to work for me. Well, that's okay. Long distance means that you can possibly buy in a cheaper market. This also means that maybe you can buy in a more desirable market. Maybe you are looking to buy a short-term rental, which means that you want to be able to buy long distance because that's where the beach area is. That's where the touristy area is, whatever it may be. So it gives you the option to still be able to find properties in those more desirable areas. The negative side of that, though, is you're not going to necessarily know what's going on day to day, either with the property itself or even in that town or changes that might be taking place there. Also, you're probably going to need to add in the cost of a property manager, or once again, put in systems like myself to be able to manage properties from long distance. One of the things that I can always recommend people should do when they are purchasing property long distance is to find somebody that's kind of that boots on the ground, somebody that you know knows the area, somebody that's kind of your first call if something comes up that you know will be able to fill you in or help you along, that just kind of knows that area really well. Lastly, let's talk about syndication. Syndication, in my opinion, is probably the closest that we as real estate investors are going to get to passive income. This is where you as a one member is putting your money and pooling it with other people to be able to buy a larger property. This is something you can actually do yourself, but that's going to be a lot more active. But people really look at becoming a passive member in real estate investing through syndications. Now, some of the pros, like I said, it's really the closest I think you can get to passive income. But in my opinion, you tend to have a lower return on your investment just because when there's a little bit less risk, there seems to be a little bit of less reward. That's just kind of how our economic system works. Also, remember that you might not have control over that property. You could probably never even set foot or ever personally see a property that you own. Now, I think just as much as flips and rentals kind of are kind of contrary to each other, I feel like syndication and wholesale also kind of works that same way. Wholesale, as I said before, I feel like is a great way to get started if you don't really have the money, but you have time on your hands. Syndication kind of works in the reverse of that. If you're a person that happens to have more money on your side, but less time, syndication might also be an option for you. Once again, go back and look at your goals and figure out kind of how that works. If you're a person that's saying, hey, I have a family, I want to spend more time with them, I have a very demanding job that I love, and I don't want to quit that to be a real estate investor, syndication might actually be a great entry point for you, since it'll still introduce you to what the world of real estate investing looks like, but we can be a little bit more less time intensive on this. If you're saying, no, I need to quit my job, I need to make money and make a ton of money, and I need to do it upfront and fast, then you want to go back and realize that that's going to take a little bit more time, which then you're looking at wholesaling or possibly flips. So I hope that people are kind of connecting how your goals and what works for you personally and what you're trying to get to has to kind of match up with one of these strategies. So you want to make sure to always be able to focus on that goal that you set at the beginning and the strategy that goes along with it. But remember to kind of always keep your ears open for different opportunities. That's one of the best things about real estate is you never know where the next deal is going to come from. Last is my favorite part, where now you get to go shopping and start looking for the properties and look and figure out the right deal and analyze those deals to make sure that you are now buying the right property for yourself. So I want you to go back now and think, and once again, this is something that you can add in the chat if you chose to write your goal or if you had that goal in mind when you hopped on today's call. But I want you, if you are open to sharing, to write which strategy you feel is the one that fits best with what you are looking to do. So share that down in the chat just so I have an idea of kind of what everybody's working on. But I always remind people, if you now realize that your strategy is not matching your goal, that's totally cool. If it doesn't match, go and make a change. So in summary, what we talked about today was being able to identify kind of why you got into real estate. Was that something that you're looking for, that financial freedom, those tax benefits, whatever it was? We then reviewed what our SMART goals look like and discussed the different strengths and cons to the strategies. And then we were able to narrow down which strategy would work best for you to be able to match your goal. And now you should have the knowledge to be able to move confidently forward. So if anybody's interested, I always offer people that I talk to, I offer a free financial cheat sheet. We go over the different variety of ways to be able to get financing. So if you're interested in that, go to lady-landlords.com/download and you can get your copy there. We talk about like 14 different ways to be able to get financing and what requirements you need to have in order to get those. And also which strategy that financing is best for. So if that's helpful, that's an option for you at that link. And lastly, if you want to stay in touch, you can always find me. I run a Facebook group called Lady Landlords, or you can connect with me on Instagram at Becky Nova 24. So thank you very much all for joining me today. I hope that this was helpful to kind of point some people in the right direction. And I am perfectly happy to take some questions or share what else is going on with other people in the group. I notice, I'm just looking here now that I stopped the share, a lot of people are looking for that buy and hold, and that's a great way to get started. So I'm very happy to hear that. So thank you guys for tuning in today.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions real quick for Becky before she goes? You can unmute yourself or put them in the chat.
Hello. Hi, Becky.
Hi.
I'm sorry. Hi, I apologize. I do have a question. I know you said that you were managing properties when you were like in DR, right? So how did you go about finding those property managers? I mean, how did you go about doing the property management yourself and not just going with a property manager?
Sure. So definitely, if you haven't listened to my episode on Real Estate Rookie, go back and listen to that. I deep dive into a lot of the different options that I do there. But one of the most important things is really putting your systems in place, making sure that you have it very clear cut, even in your lease. Like, hey, if there's a problem, who to contact. Then you have to know on your side, okay, now a tenant called me and said that they have this problem. What do I do to mitigate that? Okay, do I need to call a handyman first? Do I need to have somebody go check on it? Is this something I'm going to need a plumber? So I think it's really important to always have to kind of have like that flow chart. So you know, okay, this problem happened. This is how I'm going to handle it. So once you have a lot of those systems in place, between that, then you need to also have what are your payment systems for tenants to be able to send you their monthly rent. Then you have to think about all those other things that you might possibly be managing now, and just think about how can I now put that in a system that the tenants understand what's going on and I know how to react when that situation comes up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
so you definitely setting up that system.
Yeah, that was something that even I did when I was still managing my properties. And so where I actually currently live in a duplex and I own the quadplex next door, literally across the street. So even though they're right next to each other, one of the first things I still did was to create a lot of those systems. So then that way now when I wanted to go fly away to another country, it was the same systems in place as if I was still here. So the tenants already understood who to call, who to email, how to send money in for their rent, what to do for a maintenance issue. So to them, there was no change. There was no difference in what was happening if I was next door or if I was in another hemisphere. So
that makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, but I go much more into that in the podcast. So so definitely go back and take a listen there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I see a bunch of questions in the chat. So I'll go there. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and either ask a question out loud, or otherwise I'll kind of go through the ones I see in the chat. Okay, I'll go through the ones in the chat. First one, Charles asked, what systems do you recommend for long distance property management? So that was pretty much what I said to Fabio. I think your lease is kind of the key there. I think the lease really needs to be very clear with what expectations are, who manages everything. My lease is actually only 10 pages. And that's actually something that I made sure that every single clause in there is really directing my tenants on what to do. So when I get like messages, it's very easy for me to be able to say, hey, go back and take a look in your lease, or hey, this section 4 in your lease describes what to do for that. Just kind of as that like reminder that everything is really kind of laid out there. So remember that when you're putting in those systems for long distance property management, you want to make sure that that your lease is really solid and incredibly clear with everything that is labeled out. Ashley, let me know if it's okay. I actually have a YouTube video that goes through all the clauses that I have in my lease. If that's okay to share, let me know.
Oh my God.
And
that would be wonderful. Yes, please do.
Okay. Let me type that in. Okay, so I can't give you like the exact like video there, but if you go to YouTube /live free with Becky Nova, I have a ton of videos on there, but one of them actually walks you through every single clause that I have in my lease. So it's something that would just be really helpful for anybody that does not have a lease or wants to make sure that theirs is really the best it can be, especially for managing long distance. Head over to Live Free with Becky Nova on YouTube, and I'll walk you through exactly what I have in mind. Marie's question. Oh, actually, Charles, last thing I also want to say is what we've kind of talked about and what I mentioned with Fabio too, is the idea of once you already have tenants in place. So if you do not have tenants in place and you still need to be able to put that system in place for that long distance, you kind of have two options. And it kind of depends on where you're investing. One, you can really use a realtor to be able to rent out and show that property for you. So you can always go and actually hire somebody that way. It works out in my favor being in New York, as it's incredibly common to use brokers and realtors to be able to do that. And also it's incredibly common to have the tenants pay for that. So when I actually am down in the Dominican Republic on my beach, it doesn't cost me a single penny to be able to have a realtor actually find me a great tenant. So depending on your area, that might want to be one of your options. Otherwise, what you have to do, you can still do the screening. I think we've all kind of learned over this past year how great the digital world can kind of be. So then at that point, all you have to do is find that boots on the ground that I mentioned in the slides that can actually literally open the door for you, have a tenant walk in, look at the property, and kind of say yes or no. But by that time, you should have already had your photos and description already in an ad for those tenants to see. You should have already had those tenants be pre-qualified and answer like a pre-screening questionnaire to make sure that they actually are qualified to rent your apartment. Send them a virtual tour, a video tour of the apartment, and not just pictures, but literally walking them through, saying like, hey, here's the entrance. Now over here to your left, this is where you're going to find the bedroom. To the right, this is your living room. When you walk people through that and they really kind of get that idea, it cuts down on the amount of showings you have to do for people that are not qualified or people that are really not interested in your apartment. So then really, if you can find a boots on the ground, and once again, if you're now buying long distance, where maybe you have a friend from college or an aunt that lives there that can go and open the door, that's really something that's going to save you if you're in a place where you personally would have to pay for that realtor. But honestly, if you can get good cash flow from buying in another state, then having to pay to get a tenant in there is just another cost that you're going to have to factor in when you're doing your deal analysis. So chairs, let me know if you have any follow-up questions or give me a thumbs up in the chat, just so I know that that helped answer your questions. Marie asked, how do you begin to wholesale? So Marie, the first things, is that you that turned on your camera? Yes, hi. So with wholesaling, right there, I can't hear you, Marie, at all. You're still muted.
It's not something I even considered before, but I wasn't sure whether it's an option for a new person to jump into. Is there an association you've got to join, or is it just something you need to arrange privately?
It's something that you would do privately, but you have to check what state you're in. There's different states that you actually, that wholesaling is not really allowed. So make sure to kind of check into that to make sure that you're in a state that you can wholesale. The reason for that is you just want to make sure that you don't have to be like a realtor in your specific state. Right. Okay. So take a look at that because wholesaling, like I said, it's not allowed everywhere. But with wholesaling, really what you're doing there is you're kind of that middleman. You're really putting together those deals. So at that point, to how to get started, and same thing, sorry to say it, but there is actually a video about how to get started that I have on my YouTube because I get asked that question often. So Marie, I'm going to tell you the same thing. Go to that link that I put down in the chat and listen and watch that video there. But with wholesaling, the key to wholesaling is really networking, because now you have to find the deals. You either have to get on the phone and start calling some people to see if they're looking to sell their property. You have to network to make sure that you're finding those cash buyers, because you're going to have to be able to sell that property quickly. So you need to have a good network on both sides of deals coming in and then people that are willing to buy those deals. So how I would begin networking, how I would begin wholesaling would be to really network. You need to start talking to people to get your on the deal side, and then you need to start finding people on the other side that can be your buyers.
Right. Okay.
That's where, like I was saying, that one, it's great because you don't really need the money to start with it, but you do need the time. So that's where you want to look into any local real estate meetups that you can go to find cash buyers there. If you can, join some of the, between the real estate rookie group, lady landlords, like other groups there that you want to network with to find those right people that are going to kind of fill your list on both sides. So build an email list.
Yeah, I think I just need to read more about. I just need to read more about wholesaling, but it seems like when an offer comes, it seems like such a quick process that it's got to happen like simultaneously, quickly. Like you can't have a property under contract for too long before you can get a proper buyer to transfer to. But
it does. So it does tend to go pretty quick, which is why you kind of need to have both lists of people kind of set up. So it's because remember, you're going out and you're finding this deal. You're not sitting there waiting for something to show up on the MLS to wholesale. This is where you're finding things that you're really kind of making that deal yourself. So then, yes, once you then find a person, an owner that says, you know what? Yeah, Marie, I'm ready. I need to sell this house. I'll sell it to you. Let's go. Then you need to be able to get kind of your numbers out to your cash buyers list and say, hey, I have a deal. This is what it is. It has to be a quick close. You got to be ready to go in 30 days or less. So that's why you want to make sure to have your list of names for both sides.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Jason is asking in the chat, how much do you set aside for your Capex and maintenance? Does it vary per property or is it a flat specific amount? So for me, it's not a flat specific amount. I've actually, oddly enough, every time I've bought a property, I've actually had my mortgage company tell me how much money I had to have in savings in order to get the next mortgage. So I have just set aside those numbers based on that. And usually what the mortgage brokers are looking for is not so much the capex and maintenance side, but what they're usually looking for, in my experience, the numbers that they're coming back to me is actually a certain amount of rent that I can cover if I have vacancies. So clearly in New York, in New York City, really property doesn't sit around for 6 months. Usually you can fill a vacancy in about a week. And that's, even a long time for New York real estate. So for me, when they were asking for, well, we need to have for one property to have 6 months rent, to have those 6 months of mortgage payments, that has really kind of become then my capex and maintenance kind of emergency fund, if you will. So usually that's what they look for. In my experience, I've either been asked to make sure to have savings of 3 to 6 months to cover the mortgage in case there's a problem. So that's what I've used for that. So Jason, hopefully that answers your question. Let me know in the chat if you have a follow-up question or if that helps answer your question. Mark is asking, do you need to use a broker in NYC to find a property? No, you don't. You can. I've actually used a realtor for most of my properties in New York. It's just kind of worked for me. So I've actually, most of my properties in New York have either been on the market that were found through the MLS, which I was really lucky to find, or I've actually used the same broker for 3 multifamilies in New York. And one of them he actually brought to me was an off-market deal. So I do think it's incredibly important to have those relationships with realtors, but I don't think you need to use a broker. But I think when you're looking for a deal, you kind of need to look at it from all sides. I have relationships with wholesalers. I have relationships with realtors. I have relationships with other people that I know that are investors, because maybe at some point they're going to have to get out of their property. So I think it's kind of a multi-pronged approach to always be networking, because you never, like I said before, you never kind of know where your next deal is going to come from. Mark, let me know if that helps answer your question in the chat. And also, if you're in the New York area, I'm always happy to introduce people to people that are good. So if you want an introduction to my real estate broker in New York, let me know and I will put you guys in touch. All right, so that's Mark's question. Next one, I'm going to totally butcher your name, so I'm not going to say it, but I'll read your question out. When you self-manage, how do you handle snow removal? So this actually I posted about in Real Estate Rookie probably back in December, because that was my one last issue that I had was snow removal. So clearly, if I had owned single family properties, it would be much easier to handle snow removal, because then whoever was renting it would probably handle that snow removal. Since I own multifamilies, that clearly has become a bigger issue. So in New York, I will say that snow removal is incredibly expensive. With how bad of a winter we had in New York, I probably would have spent $6,000 to $7,000 on snow removal, which is insane. And I clearly would not want to do that. So what I was able to do with self-management, when it was something when I was in the States, I did myself. Like I said, you can see my post about that in Real Estate Rookie, literally covered in snow. But otherwise, what I've done to be able to do that, once again, thinking property management from a long distance, and what I was doing when I lived in DR was I either had to go with and suck up the money and figure out how to analyze a deal. Clearly, I would have had to do that beforehand to incorporate actually hiring professional snow removal company to do that. But like I said, it would have cost me probably $7,000 for this past year. I would have never bought that house because my deal would not have worked if that was going to be an annual expense. But what I was able to do was then find other people in the neighborhood that were willing to do snow removal. So what my husband and I actually were able to set up was we found a super for one of the other multifamily properties on the same street. And he was willing to take on some extra work. So that was something that on the side, then he was also taking care of our snow removal. So it was great because then I didn't have to pay for the professional company to get it done. He was able to make some extra money and I got an affordable rate for snow removal. At one of my other properties that's a little bit farther away, we do hire a professional snow removal company just because it's in a much cheaper area outside of New York City. So, for the $40 that would cost me compared to the $7,000 in New York City, I was willing to splurge on the $40. So that's something that you just have to look into, what your options are through companies or possibly other people in the neighborhood. I've actually found not only snow removal people, but I've also found landscapers just by talking to my neighbors or the neighbors of my rental property and say, hey, I see you cutting the grass over there. Do you want to make some extra money and cut the grass over here too? So like I said, it's kind of always beneficial to talk to the people in the neighborhood. One, because you want to know what's going on in your property when you're not necessarily there, but also because you never know when you can kind of hire them for certain jobs like we kind of discussed. So let me know if that helps answer your question. Like I said, feel free to ask a follow-up question in the chat box. Otherwise, I hope that works. Last question I see in the chat is from Jason, who says, my wife and I eventually want to move abroad ourselves once we obtain financial freedom through cash flowing rentals. Did you run into any tax obstacles living abroad with US based income? Nope, not at all. Not at all, Jason. That was actually something that was really helpful for us. So still, it depends. You need to look into what you're going to be doing. If you're going to keep a W-2, if you're going to be leaving your job, if your company would let you travel, that's definitely something that you want to make sure to always be in contact with your accountant. It's important to have a CPA as a real estate investor in general, just to make sure that you're taking advantage of everything that you kind of can. But also you want to make sure that you are discussing those different tax implications that you personally would be having if you decide, once again, to keep your job, if you're going to be working abroad, if you're going to be owning property abroad as well. All those different things are going to be kind of needed to take into consideration. But personally, nope, I did not have any problem. It was something that I discussed with my CPA before I went down there. And honestly, I was able to file my taxes like the week I got back, and we're pretty set and was much more simple to do. I lived abroad, as I mentioned on my bio slide. I used to live in Europe back in my 20s. And it was something that also, as long as I was able to communicate with my accountant and get the education I needed, I had no issue there. And I actually worked in Europe for quite a few years without problem. So just one of those things that you have to look into just as much as you'd have to look into health insurance. So something to consider. So Jason, let me know if that answers your question or if you have follow-up. I already see that you wrote down that helped. Perfect. Okay. Any other questions that anybody wanted to ask?
Well, Becky,
I don't see anything else.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Can you guys all please tell Becky thank you in the chat?
Thank you.
Yeah. And make sure you guys check out her YouTube channel. I did put the link to that in the chat. I'll also add it to Slack and then to her website too. I added that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a ton of random, whenever I get like the same question like multiple times, I either like I just make a video for it. So you could probably find a lot of stuff there if that helps. So
yeah, that's awesome. I'm a big believer in like, don't recreate the wheel. So it's awesome to have investors like you that are putting out the documents they use, the checklist they use, and their experience. So thank you very much for sharing with us. Okay. Well,
you're welcome. Of course. All right. Thank you, everybody. All right. Bye.